Rate My Professor is a review website formed in 1999 by a man of the name of John Swapchansky, studying computer science at San Jose University. He started the site because he had a horrible professor. But it was also the 90s and the dot-com era, and the internet is new and it's booming. And it's not Stanford, but he is sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley. The website started out originally as teachersratings.com, whose goal is to help students get through their college careers with minimum pay, bringing accountability to education. It's completely anonymous and no login was required. Students would leave in short reviews like Queen of the Overhead Projector. Boring, but I learned that there are 137 tiles on the ceiling. I understood more about math before taking this class. Immediately, it started to gain traction by word of mouth in college newspaper blogs. The website kept evolving. You could now comment from 80 up to 255 characters. They changed the name to Rate My Professor. Swapchansky added a chili pepper feature to gauge how hot a teacher was. And it really took no marketing because it was a good idea and a phenomenon unto itself. The website entered the mainstream with articles from CNN and NPR and continued to grow until Swapchansky finally sold the website in 2005 to 23-year-old tech entrepreneurs William DeSantis and Patrick Nagel, who really didn't do much with it but sold it to Viacom and MTV in 2007, shifting a bunch of corporate hands until it became the site as we know it today. The internet has certainly had its whirlwind with it.
I never wore my seatbelt while driving to school because I wanted to die before making it to his class.
There's also this trend all over university YouTube where teachers live react to their reviews, like the Jimmy Kimmel celebrity tweet segment, except more nerdy and less funny.
He's a bro. If you're a bro and you know about bros, then you'll like this teacher.
And it's managed to stay prevalent on these campuses still to this day.
I think once every quarter, looking at the teacher.
Also once a quarter.
Oh, I use it all the time.
I look at it all the time. I go through all of the comments. I gotta make sure.
I've definitely dodged a couple bullets.
And so students obviously very heavily rely on this review system.
No, generally I fuck with Rate My Professor.
But I was curious, are these reviews throughout the years in any way accurate? And how much so?
Because I find this website to be such a fascinating cultural phenomenon, but I want to know how vivid of a picture we can create just out of ratings alone. And given only 350 characters, I think a good professor can make or break a class. I think that's everything. And so I'm going to compare and I'm going to analyze all 4 of my professors in winter quarter with the Rate My Professor reviews on the website. And I think it's going to be fun.
First, my media ethics professor. 118 ratings, the most out of any of my teachers. What a charmed life you live if you think he's a bad professor, says one. They describe the man as funny, kind, and intelligent. A few disagree. One guy opens it up with, surprised there's not more negative reviews, saying how he's rude, has a big ego, and frankly beyond insufferable. So which of the two is he? Now that I've taken the class, I realize that it's both. These are essentially just 2 different interpretations of the same polarizing personality. For example, he took attendance by asking everyone questions like, how many hours have you spent on social media today? To which students would answer upwards of 3 or 4 hours, to which he'd publicly ridicule them for doing so and thus launching into an insightful argument about the disconnectivity of social media and the dangers of losing our digital privacy and the consequences that this poses in the information age. And he would always make it relevant by tying it into current events like the Trump administration or referencing pop culture, everything from Celebgate to Black Mirror episodes. And so it was always fascinating, but if you couldn't handle the critique that our generation is addicted and you yourself are a reflection of that, then this class was not for you, and especially considering that he would tease people often and no technology was allowed whatsoever, now you can begin to understand why there's so many negative reviews. I mean, it's not as if they're without a valid criticism though. He was definitely stubborn in his beliefs. One review touched on it that you're not getting that grade unless you give him the answer he wants, which in the 2,500 word papers I did ended up being the case. I'm not upset about it though. It was only a difference between 96.5 to 100 and I didn't try that hard, but I do think disagreeing with him was the only reason I got a point deduction. Thankfully, the grading is very easy. And so overall, I would say that this professor is a good example of how a large sample size of reviews paints a pretty accurate picture of a professor, both advantages and flaws. But I loved him. There's a reason he's considered one of the best professors at our school. He was fantastic. Personally, I would rate him a difficulty of 1 out of 5 and a quality of 5 out of 5. Next, my Communication 101 teacher. There aren't as many reviews, so I can't say that it's as representative of a sample, but some themes still emerge. Most of them mention she's caring. One comment says she used to work at a hospice and it shows, to which I completely agree. She had very motherly instincts.
Dude, my hair froze while I was walking in the train.
Your hair froze?
Yeah.
I'm sounding like such a mom. Why are you leaving the house with wet hair?
There was this ceremony that she had at the beginning of every class where everyone had the safe space to contribute whatever they felt was on their mind. It was unique, purposeful, and sometimes interesting. I mean, most people never opened up and only contributed that they were tired, hungry, or cold, but she was always receptive and responsive nevertheless.
I'm pretty tired right now.
I Okay, Ryan. All right.
I'm trying to stay awake though.
Excellent. Yeah.
I'm Kayla and
I'm Johnny and I want Frosted Flakes, the cereal.
You want them?
Yeah.
Like right now?
Yeah.
Can't
I
help
know.
you.
Every time.
We'll just have to try and distract you from
If I'm being honest, though, apart from this, I didn't love the class. It wasn't painful to sit through lectures or anything, but it just felt like kindergarten. We'd often have to share our thoughts in small groups called Think, Pair, Share, but it happened too much, and when it's an introductory class that many majors are required to take but no one actually cares about it, the conversations aren't engaging. And it was a little bit too easy. There was no midterm, no final, no in-person tests, only online quizzes with nothing ChatGPT couldn't answer, multiple choice, mind you. The only other thing we had was 2 750-word papers, which were easy and graded quite forgivingly, and so you could see how I slowly started to lose motivation to attend class. When it's too easy, I clock out. But that just might be me. Most of the reviews rave about her, especially in her higher level classes. Some needed the flexibility she provided. Some enjoyed the interactive in-class activities. One review calls her a beautiful lady, inside out. Another says she's one of the best professors they've had at the ball. Personally, though, I would give her a difficulty of 0 out of 5 and a quality of 3 out of 5. So this is an example of a professor whose reviews I found myself mildly disagreeing with. She was cool, but Next, my honors class, the intersection of religion and politics. A general consensus of the ratings call her professional, helpful, and sweet. The earliest reviews date back all the way to 2003, when the website was still in its infancy, and you could tell because the character limit was short and the chili pepper feature was still around, so 90% of them comment on her appearance. That was 20 years ago now. No one really mentions her appearance anymore, but I will say that she came to class every day like she was featured in a Japanese streetwear fashion magazine. This girl was unbelievably cool. Most agree that she's an easy grader, that you can get an A without doing any of the readings, but most notably they agree on how she fostered amazing discussions to these fascinating topics. Granted, it's a university in the middle of a big city, so sometimes it was a little too theoretical and woke for me at times.
they are racialized, but at the same time they are de-racialized.
But it introduced me to powerful arguments, especially only growing up in a conservative environment, and I walked away with a much more open mind.
The other day was telling me about this concept of punching up versus punching down.
Yes.
So that's cool.
Exactly. So in other words, power relations. Like for example, if someone was wearing women power, I don't think it's necessarily offensive. But if someone like president would wear white power, it would be, so that's exactly like power dynamics. Who is making fun of who? And political satire, which I like, is the one which kind of always make fun of those people like punching up.
So I really enjoyed the class, but the most recent review is upset with her, accusing her of being anti-Christian. But I'm actually 99% sure I know who wrote this because I sat next to him in class and I had to peer review his final research paper proposal. And if it is him, which it is, he's not being fair and playing victim mentality a little bit because she was probably just giving constructive criticism to what was a poorly thought out submission. So this actually provides a perfect example of why you can't take any one review in isolation as the truth. Otherwise, besides a few slightly other negative reviews about it being boring sometimes, lecture-wise, it's overwhelmingly positive feedback, and I would agree. Personally, I'd give her a difficulty of 2 out of 5 and a quality of 4 out of 5. Finally, my ancient Rome class, hands down the best class I had all quarter. The professor has a 3.8 out of 5, the lowest rating thus far. The negative ratings, which are many, tell you to avoid. Some don't even explain themselves, they just ominously forewarn you against it. Others note how the quiz questions are hyper-specific and impossible, that there's too much reading, that the lectures are boring and he reads off a script monotonously, and again, most tragically, that no technology is allowed. But not to worry, he has his fair share of defenders. Teach on, professor, says one review. Teach on! Have you forgotten you're a student in university? Says another. Anyone who complains about the reading is a baby. This is college. He has fascinating lectures, is extremely knowledgeable and passionate about the subject, and overall is a pretty funny guy. This was true to my experience. I love this man so much. He's a nerd in such a beautiful way. He sort of took ancient Rome and boiled down the vocabulary as if you were just guys shooting the shit at a local bar, and it made it so much more entertaining to listen to.
Just as Sejanus thought it was going to offer him all this power, the letter changed tone abruptly, denouncing Sejanus as a traitor and ordering his arrest. Sejanus is standing there with his pants down, like, oh my God. On recovery from his illness, check this out. Caligula demanded that any person who had offered their own life to the gods in sacrifice, if he would get better, now you have to do it. Right? So if you're like, oh, God, I give my life if only you'd spare Caligula, he hears about that. He's like,
I did find one valid criticism amidst the ratings, which was that he provided zero feedback. For example, I poured my heart and soul into the final 8-page paper, finishing it 3 days early, which never happens for me, mind you, but I did it because I wanted to make it the best paper possible because I respect him so much and I wanted to show him that I cared. But it received, as far as feedback, an AI-generated bland-ass response. So that was disappointing, to say the least. But the other complaints are pretty much unfounded. I mean, the quiz questions of the readings are on incredibly specific details that in the grand scheme of things do little to increase your overall knowledge of ancient Rome, fine. But I actually think that was an effective strategy on his part. For example, one time we were asked, in Plutarch's account of Julius Caesar's assassination, the specific number of stab wounds he received when he was killed in the theater of Pompey. Is that important? No, of course not. The difference between 23 and 38 stab wounds isn't going to affect the eventual outcome that the Republic is going to fall. But questions like that force you to really spend time, and I mean really spend time with the material. In order to receive an 11 out of 10 on each quiz, I eventually learned, you had to pick apart each sentence and stare at this antiquated grammar until it actually made sense to your brain, rather than just quickly skimming over it. And it was a lot of work, but I still retain that information to this day, whereas I couldn't say the same about most of my other classes. And my God, it was so refreshing to work hard and be rewarded and differentiated for it, rather than the unfortunate reality of education today, which is that the mediocre A is given out to everyone as a participation trophy because grade inflation is a real thing. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. My point is that you had to work hard for an A. And ultimately, that brings me back to the specific review which convinced me to take the class in the first place. History student writing. This is the last great history professor who has not made room for students from No Child Left Behind. If you want to be held to a standard, take his class. And I'm so glad I did. Personally, I would give him a difficulty of 5 out of 5 and a quality of 10 out of 5. Best class ever. So anyway, in conclusion, I kind of confirmed what I had already suspected, which is that it's a pretty accurate tool. You can get a rough picture of how a teacher is through the themes repeated throughout all of the anecdotes. The number itself doesn't really matter. It's been proven in scholarly studies that that number is only reflective of how easy of a grader it is. If you're looking for an academic challenge, you can opt for someone with a 3, or if you're looking for an easy A, probably someone with a 4.7 or higher is a good rule of thumb. Maybe, I don't know. My media ethics professor was pretty easy A. He had a 4.1, but he was a polarizing figure. Speaking of, polarizing figures tended to have more reviews than teachers that you didn't feel strongly about. And that's because hating a teacher and loving a teacher is the same thing. You go out of your way to leave a review like, this is the best teacher I've had in my life. Or you don't leave a review at all, which is indifference. Which reminds me of a quote, the opposite of hate is not love, it's indifference. If you're a good teacher, you're gonna have bad reviews. The best teachers will have the worst reviews. I still think it's kind of surreal that this website exists. It feels like that episode of Amazing World of Gumball where they all rate each other. It's very postmodern, very bleak, and it feels like it should be grounds for libel. It's a public gossip forum, but I feel justified in using it because I think my university should at least provide some sort of outlet for evaluations. I know some universities do this. Northwestern, for example, has an evaluation system, an internal one, and you think you have to have like a school email to access it. I think that should be standard so that we don't have to go on the internet. The students should be able to evaluate. First of all, I'm paying thousands of dollars. Second of all, I am both the consumer and the product. But that is open to doubt still. Let me know what your opinion is because I like discussion and I think we can have a better discussion here than in most of my online forum stupid discussion posts.